Hey guys, it's Tyler, Tennis with Tyler, and today we are going to be talking about how to hold the tennis racket. If you're a beginner, if you're a player picking up the sport, this is the video for you. Too many players do not hold the tennis racket properly, which limits their game. So the first thing is, when you hold the tennis racket, do you want to be loose or do you want to be tight? Do you want to hold it loose or do you want to hold it tight? Pause the video, think about it, and then press play and we'll get into it, all right? So what's your answer, loose or tight? You guys want to make sure that you hold it loose. You want to let the racket work for you. You don't want to work for the racket. For the ground strokes and the serve, you want to make sure that your racket is loose. If we were on court right now, if you were in an in-person lesson with me and you were beginning, I would give you my racket. I would swing and I would go like this. I would say, try to take my racket out of my hand. So I would swing, and I would tell them, try to take the racket out of my hand. So you would come up to me, you would pull on the racket, you'd look at me funny, you'd be like, why am I doing this? But you'd be able to take the racket straight out of my hand. And then what I would say is, yeah, that's how loose I want you to hold that racket. And then what I would do is I would make them swing and I tell them stop at contact, and I would try to then pull the racket out of their hand. And many players, when they swing and stop at contact, beginners, even intermediate players, when I try to take the racket out of their hand, they don't give it up because they're gripping that racket too tight. When you grip that racket too tight, you're not only limiting your actual shot, you're making yourself susceptible to injury, right? Tennis elbow, all different arm, shoulder problems. It happens because you're holding the racket too tight. The looser you can be, the less wear and tear that you are going to do on your body, okay? So a great way to make sure that you're holding the racket as loose as possible to get that feeling is I want you to do a couple drop feeds, hit with your ball machine or your coach. Get your index finger and your thumb and just hold the racket with those two fingers, index finger and thumb, with just these two fingers, all right? And just get a couple balls and just hit with it, okay? Index finger and thumb. It's going to feel super weird and you're just going to swing. It's going to show you and get you to feel that looseness that you actually want. It's going to feel weird, but again, it's not if you make it or not, really. You could even do shadow swings. It doesn't even matter where the ball goes, but it gives you that feel of how loose that you actually need to be. Another way to make sure that you are loose enough is what you can do is you can get your hitting arm, right? You're going to do a forehand, and you're going to grip your wrist with your opposite hand. That's going to stop you from holding the racket super tight and really using your arm. It's going to have you let the racket go, right? So here's what you're going to do. You're going to do a couple drop feeds. You're going to grip your wrist, go let it bounce twice so you have time, and you're going to swing. Let's do it again. Grip the wrist and swing, and one more. Grip the wrist and swing. Now, another way to make sure that you're holding the racket loose enough, if you do a shadow swing, I'm not sure if this mic will pick it up, but you always want to hear the whoosh. You guys watch Patrick Montalague, Serena Williams' coach. In every single one of his videos, this guy mentions you want to hear the whoosh. You want to let it go. Whoosh, whoosh, right? Let that racket go. You want to hear the whoosh. The whoosh is the sound of the wind going against your racket while you hit. If you're holding the racket too tight and not swinging fast enough, you're not going to be able to hear it. So make sure you do some shadow swings and just hear that whoosh, right? Think of your racket as like a whip. You're accelerating it, you're letting it go. Okay, so Tyler, you told me to hold the racket loose. I get it, I have all these drills, I have all these tips to do, but why? Why do I gotta hold the racket loose? How do I hit power if I'm holding the racket super loose? How, right? Us, when we think we wanna hit it hard, what? We grip it super tight in our arms? No. In tennis, all the power comes from your legs. Legs and rotation equals power. The more you get into your legs, the more you rotate, the more you accelerate, the more power you will get in your shots. It has nothing to do with your arms. That's why unless you're Nadal or Serena, look at Djokovic, Federer, they all have noodle arms, right? Kind of, but they don't all have big arms, but they have super big legs because that is where the power comes. In tennis, the power comes from the ground up. So if you want to hit harder, and once you get further down your tennis journey and get better, right? You get more confident with the strokes, you're going to just get into your legs more. The more you get into your legs, the more you're going to be able to generate pace, right? So again, you want to hold the racket loose. None of the power comes from your arm. Now the next thing, when you're holding this tennis racket, right, how to hold the tennis racket, you always want to make sure for the forehand and the backhand that your strings, this is your racket face right here. You guys see that racket face? When I was younger, all the kids, I would too, we'd go, right? You'd make faces in your racket, right? Your racket face. So what you're going to do is you always want your racket face tilted downward. Now, I'm not a big grip guy. There's so many other coaches that'll go, for beginners and intermediate, they'll go, okay, so now you're going to need to go to bevel 3, bevel 1, you need to tilt it this way. Now I want bevel 2 and 3, and then that is your grip. No, what I tell all my students is to just tilt the darn racket down. Just tilt the racket down and see where they end up. I'm going to watch though. You want to make sure when you tilt the racket, you are not continental and you're not fully Western, but anywhere in between is an okay grip and an okay way to hold your racket, okay? For more of a beginner student, I'd want them in an E-string grip, which means it's not tilted that much, but just turn sideways and just tilt your racket face downward. As long as, again, if you're not like this or you're not like this, you are perfectly fine and good to go. You always want to make sure that your strings are tilted downward because that will help you keep the ball in. If your strings are facing upward, when you swing, the ball is going to go super long. If you tilt those strings downward, just like I said, right, that ball is now going to dive in, as you can see. So next time you're on court, number 1, hold the racket loose. Number 2, make sure your strings are tilted downward, your racket face is tilted downward, and you will be able to play much better tennis. If you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments below. I hope that this video now teaches you to 1, hold the racket loose, and number 2, to tilt your strings down. And you guys will be able to properly hold a tennis racket. Guys, if you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments below. Have a good one and happy hitting.